is many times incomplete. And so, but that's social sustainability. I mean, that's a profitable business, a very nice business, but it can just go away because there is a social component to it, a human capital component of it that is disappearing because of this distribution. And of course, it's a sustainable business model, obviously. So that's one thing. So the next time you buy a Panam hat, please do buy them. Just remember that they're Ecuadorian. But anyway, so that's one, social dimension. Another social dimension that I would like to introduce, because when you are sitting in New York City or across the river in much nicer and quieter New Jersey, or in a European city, you take some things for granted. But in the developing world, if we think of democratic capitalism as a social model, it won't be sustainable unless it produces what the population expects, standards of living. You know, a group described it, and I think, Mary, you read it. It's a different set of things. It's not money. Money is just it's an intermediate concept, really. But unless it produces that, it's not sustainable. And there's one mediating factor that we believe, and I believe is super important, and that's entrepreneurship. Because that's something that you have. In the US, more than in any other industrial economy, but you have all over the industrial world, the industrialized world. We don't. We really don't much, and it has different roots, and we don't have the environment to make it flourish. We don't have the environment to allow, for many startups, 9 out of 10 fail here, and that's fine, and they move on and take another risk and take another cut at a new enterprise. We don't have that, and without that, the model itself is not sustainable because capitalism depends on better allocation of resources that came out of ideas and ideas and ideas. That's not what happens in our world, and that dimension of sustainability of the whole system that is lost, that we don't have, that is absent, we need to make up for, and it's complicated because it's a behavioral issue. It's people not taking risks. It's people seeing business as the enemy, I have to say. And if you look at the rhetoric of, you know, President Chavez in Venezuela, President Morales in Bolivia, it's anti-business, and many people focus on what they say, but what's interesting is why many people follow them. You know, they are just, you know, in a way, they're products of a reality. Of course, they've been very successful in harnessing a trend or a feeling, but there are people who respond to that. So that second social dimension, entrepreneurship, is critical. And it's something, by the way, when you think in North-South, it's something that we need a lot of help with too. I mean, in the previous panel, many different initiatives were outlined that are amazing and are super beneficial for developing countries. But without this entrepreneurial drive that is at the core of what we're missing, I think, the whole system will fall apart. And they will follow whomever, I call it magical populism, because it has a resemblance of a scheme. It really has nothing. It's empty, but it doesn't matter. People just want an answer. So that's the second, entrepreneurship. And the third, I would like to highlight from a developing country perspective or region perspective is the geopolitics of sustainability. And by that, of course, we all will, I don't know, we'll think probably the latest, Copenhagen, right? And how we didn't get what we hoped as a human race, not as a country necessarily, or in particular. But I mean, for us, for instance, in Latin America, particularly in Latin America, we are in a blind spot in the world. And I loved, again, listening to this morning, Kate mentioning what you're doing and how you are close to Central America, which is even a smaller portion of Latin America. But the whole region, the whole Latin American region is about a bit less of 9% of the world population. It's about 6% of world's GDP, so we are poorer than the world average. It's about 5% of global trade. It's about less than 7% of the stock of foreign direct investment globally. And we receive a very small share of humanitarian aid because the humanitarian aid goes to Africa, the investment goes to Asia. We're in a blind spot. I always will joke that if the world were a village, you know, we've all seen that kind of metaphor, of 1,000 people, you know, you have the two nice neighborhoods, right? The US, Europe, North America, not including Mexico, but North America, the US, Canada, Europe, and those are the nice neighborhoods, one with malls and skyscrapers, and the other one with castles and mansions and whatnot. living nicely with its problems, whatever, but you know. Then we have this other neighborhood, you know, all of them look Asian, and you know, a lot of investment goes there. They work hard, save a lot. You know, China investment saving rate is 40% of GDP, so that, you know, that tells you a little bit about their behavior. You have Africa, clearly a problem with humanitarian consequences, and a lot of the help from these two neighborhoods go to Africa. And then we have this neighborhood of 90 people out of 1,000. You know, we don't trade much, we don't have much investment, we have great music, we party late at night, great food, and we give Shakira to the world, and we give, you know, Juanes to the world, just to mention two Colombian ones. But we are disconnected. Well, for us, sustainability is actually a big potentially a big geopolitical lever. Because we, Latin America, have a lot of forests and we have a lot of water for the decades to come, both of which are going to be crucial at a global scale. How we use that, of course, it's well, I mean, we have to decide and we have to do that, but it has a big potential implication geopolitically. So it's something we should not forget. I mean, because this is not the world. If this were the world, you know, the world leaders, we should, you know, we could go home, because it would be an enlightened discussion. We don't have to agree here. I'm sure we don't agree, but it doesn't really matter. I think the values are correct, are the right ones, leading the discussions, at least from the discussions I heard in the morning. But we're not. We may play a part, but we're not all the decision makers that matter. So we need to do something. And let me talk a little bit about Costa Rica. It's not my home country, but it's not my native country, but it's my home country now. And one that is really amazing. It's not perfect. Indeed, it's not perfect, but it's one that has actually found geopolitical importance being super tiny, 4 million out of 7 billion, you do the math, right? And GDP-wise, or whatever dimension you pick, should be completely relevant, and still is not. I mean, and, you know, the seat that Costa Rica had in the Security Council in the UN, it wasn't a coincidence. It was sophisticated political negotiations, maneuvering from the Costa Rican government, but it wasn't only that. It was also a recognition to a generation or two-generation-old reforms and trade-offs, or what seemed like trade-offs at the beginning, that were long-term bets that, as I said, I think are getting short-term and short-term. On education first, of course, they abolished the army in 48, and that was a big step. Basically, it freed up financial resources. But beyond that, they've made decisions. They made decisions not to exploit oil that they know they have offshore, and they are not exploiting it. And in my native country, in Ecuador, President Correa is trying to convince the world that someone should pay for the flows of capital that exploitation of oil would have brought to Ecuador. And although it seems nice, if every developing country were to say that, nobody will pay for that. I mean, even if now, he's not finding who pays for that, by the way. So he's not succeeding. But even if he did, that's not sustainable either, because it's not true. It's an illusion to believe that at the world level, somebody will say, okay, we'll pay every developing country, you know, all the flows that would be equivalent to what you would get out exploiting these resources. That's not going to happen. Costa Rica has made decisions on those trade-offs of not exploiting them. There are some mining issues, and still, I mean, it's not perfect, as I said, and as Rosemary said, it's not perfect, but the trade-offs are there in the social discussion to be addressed, and there are differences, but that's the way it is anywhere. And one thing that I think over time, because it takes some time to build reputation, right? I mean, as a friend of mine used to say, I have good friends who say a lot of interesting things, as you see. But, so you see, it's all about having good friends. But, you know, social reputation is something you win over a long time and you lose very, very quickly, you know, of any sort. That's true for a person and it's true for a country. So Costa Rica has built a reputation over a couple of decades at least. And now it reinforces any sustainable business model you can think of. Because clearly, if you hear something that is sustainable at a business level, coming from Costa Rica has a little bit of an edge. I mean, you read it in the newspaper, you will say, maybe it's true. If you read, and you mentioned, it was Vietnam or it was Thailand? It was Vietnam. If you hear something like sweatshops in Vietnam, you believe it. I mean, it's associated. And I know Vietnamese people who are actually